everybody, Ty here. Boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. So, in this one, we obviously are going to be talking about the upcoming southern winter storm because it's starting to look pretty likely at this point. There is still a chance that it may not happen, but I'm starting to have more and more confidence that it will. So, if you live in any of these areas in the blue here, oops, moved the screen, didn't mean to. If you live in any of these areas here that are within the blue right now, I would start preparing. Don't panic necessarily. There's no need to panic. But I would definitely make sure that you have the supplies that you need for this upcoming winter storm and just wait it out. Things are going to change after this storm comes through. I mean, it's going to be cold for a bit, but after this weekend passes, as we get closer towards February, we're going to notice a big change, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the video. But for right now, we're going over the likelihood of seeing accumulative snow right now. And if you've noticed, and if you were watching last night's video in comparison to now, what you will notice is now we've got this blue area, or actually really two blue areas at this point. What we're looking at here is the percentile, or we're looking at it by percentile, is the likelihood of seeing snow or ice accumulation above a quarter of an inch. These likelihoods over here towards Louisiana, parts of southern Mississippi, over towards Houston, have spiked a bit. We're starting to get to the 50 to 70 percentile range plus at this point. We've also noticed that we have a secondary area over here towards the Carolinas and coastal Georgia in particular, where we have started to also see an increase in probability. Also, and this is with the latest model run that I've seen, we're starting to see a little bit of a northward trend here. Don't know if I trust that just yet. This could come down to the wire here in regards to who gets what in regards to, let's say, Atlanta and anywhere over towards I-20 and areas further to the south. I-20 I'm a little bit more confident in. I-85 a little bit more questionable there, especially I-75, 85 north in particular. So keeping an eye on that, of course, but probabilities have increased. We were kind of sitting at the 10% here. Now we're more so on the edge of that little 30 to 50% region there now. So a lot to talk about in regards to that storm. But here's the kicker in the midst of all this to go along with it. If we were to go to the day 1 to 3 time frame here, oops, didn't want to do that. If we were to go ahead and take a look at our, let's say, 2-inch probabilities for snow, watch the signal that we're going to get as we head into tomorrow evening for the Northeast now. Look at that. High probabilities all of a sudden. And I haven't been talking about this setup as much. I have been talking about it, but I haven't been confident in it, mainly due to the fact that I was uncertain as to how the outcome would go. Some models were showing a potential noreaster-esque type system, then others weren't showing it at all. So I was mentioning it briefly, but I was never really able to fully go into detail confidently because of all the model madness. Just like we have model madness with the southern snowstorm, it's exactly the case as to what's going on in the Northeast. But confidence has increased dramatically over the last 24 hours here. Late last night, after I made the video, I started looking at models again, and I started seeing the GFS and the Euro in pretty good agreement at this point. So now from the Allegheny Mountains, I hope I pronounced it right. I'm sure you'll correct me in the comments. And then over here towards New England now, we have high confidence of seeing at least 2 inches or more of snow and accumulation over here towards these regions. Some of these places could even go as high as 6 inches here. We could actually switch this over to 4-inch accumulations. Probabilities are very high as well to go along with it. Thus, we will be going live tomorrow to cover this as well. And then the craziest part about this is all while this is going on, we have rain going on towards the deep south. But if you go over, and if you look on the bottom left corner of your screen here, you'll see that we actually have a couple of marginal risks for severe weather. Do I think anything major will come of this? Not really. However, there is a chance of a brief tornado over towards the Tallahassee region, or maybe a damaging wind gust. These storms are probably going to be few and far in between. So you would have to be lucky or unlucky, whichever side of the fence you're on. If you like severe weather, I guess you would be lucky. Unlucky if you don't, to end up being caught under a storm that may have the potential to produce damaging winds or a tornado. And this threat does persist into tomorrow. Now, the threat, I expect it to remain pretty low. This is not a robust, severe setup by any stretch of the imagination, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if we ended up seeing a tornado or severe thunderstorm warning. That being said, I'm not going to be putting a whole lot of emphasis on severe weather in the short term, because obviously with the big time Arctic outbreak here and lack of warm air mass, we're probably not going to have the ingredients needed to produce much in the way of thunderstorms. And that's existent especially on this day 3 outlook and beyond here. So go through days 4 through 8, potential is going to be too low across the board here. Really not much of a surprise to be had. Now, let's get into the model data, and of course this time we're going to go into the full range here. We're going to of course start out with the big elephants in the room, starting with our noreaster. So we have the GFS on the main part of the screen, Euros on the bottom left corner. We're going to take this slow here, and we're going to start out by of course looking at the timing of this upcoming noreaster. Whereas before, GFS was the main one that was on this setup occurring, Euro was kind of against it. Now, if we compare these two, we're just going to jump this to about 36 hours out. Almost looking identical. The winds with the Euro are stronger in the upper levels of the atmosphere, but definitely looks a little bit colder with the GFS, but almost a uniform look between these two models at this point. So, pretty high confidence that we're going to get some snow. The moisture is all there. And then also the cold air is there, which is just what we would need. It's going to be a low pressure that pops up early in the day, and it's going to actually be accompanied by this low pressure that's over here in the deep south right now that's causing all the rainfall. As this pushes north, as I said before, cold air mixes with some of the remnant moisture, and we can get a pretty significant burst of snow over here towards the northeast. Some of these places could potentially see up to about 6 inches plus, as we mentioned. So we'll watch this move out. And what we'll be paying attention to next is the big Arctic blast to go with it. Once we get towards the 21st, attention shifts over to the Gulf now. So go up to about 75 hours, and then you end up seeing this little feature pop up right here. This is going to be our low pressure center that's going to be responsible for causing the winter weather over towards the deep south. Now we'll watch this move along. Cold air meets up as well to go along with it. And this is where things get interesting for the deep south here. Now recently I've also noticed there is a slight northward trend with this low pressure that's popped up, whereas before I was saying looked like central Florida was going to be the point of interest. Now we're starting to shift a little bit towards the Big Bend and the Panhandle, so that may push some of that snow a little bit further to the north. Atlanta in particular, it looks like you're going to be right on the edge of getting a decent amount of accumulative snow, or maybe nothing at all. It's such a toss-up at this point, honestly. If we were to keep moving this forward beyond this point, though, here comes that cold air, so whatever snow does fall, it's going to be hanging around for a while. And you can see this trough deepen as we go further and further along. With this also, we still have to keep an eye out for these clipper systems that'll come in from Canada. Occasionally, they could bring a little bit of remnant snow if there's any moisture left over. With as cold as it's going to be, I'm kind of leaning against it, but you never know. But in any case, though, like I said, look at this. In either case, whether we're looking at GFS or the Euro, very stout trough comes in, brings that cold air, and we end up staying in that cold, unfortunately. So, and this is going to be a thing for pretty much the lower 48 as a whole here. We're going to get into the details with that in just a minute. Like I said, timestamps will be in the description because this is probably going to be a long video. But as we go further along towards the end of the week, we do start to see some ridging here. Whether it's the GFS or the Euro you look at, you see that cold air begin to retreat back up to the north. So eventually we do thaw out towards the 26th and beyond. And maybe we get to see some temperatures that are a little bit closer to average. Still probably going to be a little bit frigid, but it's not going to be, let's say, 15 degrees in Atlanta or maybe about 30 degrees towards Jacksonville per se. So the very least, though, we're on the up and up, so to speak. Now, as we go further along here, this is where things start to get a little bit wacky between the models here. With this ridging that I'm seeing here on the Euro, haven't really seen it pop up on the GFS yet, so the timing is a little bit off. But we do see a very similar feature, perhaps not quite as stout as the Euro coming in. I have a fleeting suspicion that maybe before the end of the month we might have an opportunity, hence an opportunity, not a guarantee for severe weather, but an opportunity for maybe some severe weather in the deep south. And what a paradox that would be, right? To have significant winter storm towards the deep south this upcoming week, and then to end out the month, we may very well have a chance at some severe weather. Now, there's two outcomes here, obviously. The Euro outcome definitely gives a better chance of severe weather. I don't think that we'll have the proper large-scale ascent or lift that we would need, or moisture even at this point. But time will only tell with this. We go to the GFS and beyond, nothing's even showing up no matter how far ahead I move. So in that case here, kind of uncertain as to which of these two outcomes occur. Obviously, we prefer the more tame outcome, but we'll just have to play it by ear and wait and see what happens. Now, if we were to move these four beyond that point, notice that things look a little bit more reasonable, at least until we get towards the 1st of February here, where we have yet another trough coming in from the GFS. This looks very reminiscent to what the Euro is showing, but at a much later time frame, and in a time frame no less where I have a lot less confidence right now. But if this scenario occurs, this also looks like there is a chance for severe weather as well. So a lot kind of going on there. I'm going to wait and see what happens, but it looks like as we get into February, the severe weather threat may very well go up. Now, this is a pretty stout look right here as well from the perspective of this trough here. As a result, this probably would produce a big line of thunderstorms if this scenario were to play out, and this would be how we end the month of January, is with that line of thunderstorms. And then as we get into February, we're looking a little bit more tame to start out, and then huge storm system expected to come in for the northwest here. So like I said, hard to say what's going on here at this point, but in either case, it looks like business will be picking up on the warmer side of things, thankfully, but still looks like there still might be more active weather to come here before all is said and done. Now, getting into the temperatures, and this is where a lot of us are going to be kind of nail biting or kind of licking our wounds here, because this is where things are a lot less pleasant, and this is going to go regardless of whether you have winter weather or not at this point, unfortunately. So move the GFS here. Obviously, as we get towards the afternoon of the 20th, this is when we start to see those temperatures dip, and this is when the Arctic outbreak begins here. Already by this point, you're seeing temperatures that do not belong at all. You're seeing Nashville, Tennessee, 16 degrees Fahrenheit by the time we're getting close to lunchtime here, which is crazy. My area, 21 degrees. You're seeing a lot of areas over towards the northern states already well below zero. Expect wind chill advisories and wind chill warnings to be in effect very soon, if they haven't already been put into effect. And then as we continue to go forward, we're going to continue to see this cold air begin to spread across the lower 48 as a whole here. By the time we get into the early afternoon tomorrow, we're looking at Houston at 31 degrees ahead of the winter weather event. We have Atlanta at 37. We have Montgomery at about 41. Montgomery, however, I do think that you're probably going to be stiffed on snow. Then you look over to the northeast, you're seeing 16 degrees Fahrenheit over here towards New York. So frigid air taking over the entire lower 48 at this point. The only areas that really seem like they're exempt are those far southern Florida where we're in the 70s, which is nice. And then over here towards the southwest where we're probably still going to get into the 60s, maybe even some low 70s here and there. But outside of that, it seems like hardly anyone is exempt from this at all. And it doesn't matter if I'm looking at the GFS or the Euro. Both are showing it. Here's the Euro. Euro actually has been trending with colder temperatures over the last few days, and we're going to continue to see that here. But actually, in this case, it does look like GFS is a little bit more extreme starting out But as we go further along here, Euro does look like it starts to get a little bit colder than GFS. So in the early run, it looks like in either case, as we get to the 21st into the 22nd and beyond, the frigid air spares practically no one. Unless you're over towards southwest southern Florida. Even southern Florida starts to drop off a little bit. We still get a few 70s here and there. But starting out, though, those mornings are still going to be pretty frigid over there as well. By the time we get towards the end of the week, regardless of which model you're looking at, it looks like the cold air does make its way into the northeast here. We could see some single-digit temperatures overnight. We could even see some below zeros here and there across the northeast before all is said and done. But again, as I mentioned before, once we get towards the 25th and beyond, we do start to level off just ever so slightly. Now, the thing that I'm worried about with this is eventually after we get closer towards the end of the month, and with the potential of maybe some more severe weather possible, with that collision of warm and cold, also immunity is going to be an issue. Make sure you are drinking plenty of vitamin C, keeping yourselves healthy, because I do think this is going to be one of those situations where that rapid warm-up is going to get quite a few people sick. That rapid change is usually an immunity killer. And look at this warm sector that we end up getting by the time we get towards the 29th on Wednesday. That is very abundant. And I'm sure there's going to be some Gulf of Mexico moisture associated along with that, so we're going to be keeping an extra close eye on the region here. Now, when we look at the GFS, still a little colder, but you do see a bit of a warming trend. It just seems like it takes a little bit longer with this. As of right now, model madness still continues in regards to that severe weather setup, or potential severe weather setup. Like I said, nothing's really etched in stone at this point, really, with any of these forecasts, except for maybe the noreaster. And even that I'm still questioning. I do think it's probable, but we'll have to see how that goes. In any case, though, regardless of what we're looking at this point, we're going to go all the way up to 360 hours. Big warm-up is anticipated, at least with the GFS. The Euro, we do have a couple more cold snaps possible with this. We'll have to see which of the two trends win out at this point, or if a whole new trend ends up taking root here. Now, by the time we get past the Euro's range, we're at 366 hours. Very prominent warm sector exists over the GFS, over this region for the GFS. And again, I'm definitely leery off of either of these looks, regardless of the time frame, whether it's the 29th or the 3rd of February. It does seem like there's going to be a point where we may see some severe weather. But in any case, though, we're not going to go super far on the range with the wind chill index, but we're going to definitely hash out the areas where I would be most concerned for those dangerous, I would dare even say life-threatening wind chills at this point. So, of course, obviously, keeping things as they are. Euro's going to be on the bottom left corner. But what we're going to be paying attention to is really just the 20th onward. And look at this, about 40, potentially even 50 below zero here towards far North Dakota here. And really no one's exempt from it. There's actually an extreme cold warning for my area, as the wind chill is actually expected to be 10 degrees by the time we get towards lunchtime. That is pretty friggin' brutal. Also, as we get towards the northeast, we're sitting either right at zero for the wind chills, if not below zero. And really, like I said, those below zero wind chills are running rampant across the the northern half of the U.S. here. It's honestly jaw-dropping to see just how far these have spread. And the thing is, we're far from finished here. We'll go ahead and take a look at the Euro as a comparison here, but it's pretty much academic at this point. Really, we're more or less doing a comparison. I can't even speak looking at these temperatures. It's unbelievable. Wow, the Euro's even colder, which is not a surprise. We mentioned before that the Euro's kind of been trending colder out of the two models. But as you can see here, ridiculous numbers that definitely do not belong in the South at all. Really anywhere. Maybe towards North Dakota we see stuff like this, but in either case, whether it's GFS or the Euro outcome, just be ready for the cold. Of course, also make sure that you are properly preparing with your practicing proper fire safety, of course. and also plumbing safety as well, because these can do a number on your pipes here. The last thing you would want is for below zero temperatures and then to have a leak. That would be one of the worst case scenarios. Same thing can be said in regards to anywhere where we're, even if we're not below zero, if we're in the single digits, still a big time problem here. But as we go further along here, coldest temperatures are honestly yet to come as far as the models are concerned in regards to our wind chills here. The worst really, I think, would probably be towards the 21st into the 22nd as that system's coming in. But after that point, we do see some improvements. Towards the 22nd, look at these numbers that I'm seeing here towards my area, over towards Birmingham, Mississippi. Single digit wind chills. Last time I remember working in single digit wind chills was probably about 3 years ago. It's crazy to think that we're back at this point again. And I honestly want to say no thank you to that. But after this point, though, so we get towards the 22nd and beyond, we do start to see a slight improvement of those wind chills. Even though there is a little bit of reinforcing cold air to go in behind this, it's not going to be anywhere near as cold as the early part of this upcoming week here. There's still going to be a lot of below zero wind chills and temperatures as a whole here, but those are going to start to be a little bit more confined over towards the Midwest, and even then we're seeing improvements there as well. Whereas before, at one point, we were seeing negative 40 and negative 50. Now we're starting to get into negative single digits at least. So a little bit of positive news to be had there. And then, of course, as we mentioned, by the time we get into next week, we're starting to at least look a little bit more reasonable, I would say. So regardless of whether you're looking at GFS and beyond that point, time we get towards about 180 hours out and beyond, we're starting to look a little bit more realistic here. Still going to be cold, but not brutally cold to the point where you're worried about your safety. Now, it's going to be a couple sneaky cold blasts beyond that point, and then, of course, as we mentioned before, that big warm-up's going to happen after that. So we just got to get through this week. It's the main concern that we have at this juncture. So next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and, of course, take a look at the precip maps. So this is where things have gotten really interesting and a bit more complicated too. So, of course, we're going to start out with this system over here that's towards the deep south. This is producing a lot of the rainfall. Here's the GFS on the front, on the main part of the screen, Euros on the bottom left. So we're going to move both of these, and you'll kind of get to see exactly what I'm talking about here. This low pressure is really going to be the catalyst for our winter weather. You can already see the snow beginning to set up because we still have warm moist air coming in from the Gulf here, but it's interacting with this cold air here. Look at this 540 line, that's a 32-degree line. So regardless of which model you're looking at, you can clearly see by the time we get towards 30 hours, this low is racing off to the north and the pressure is dropping, so it's getting stronger. And this is where things start to really get interesting for the mid-Atlantic and also the Northeast. By the time we get into the early afternoon tomorrow, we have some pretty heavy snow falling over towards Philly, New York City, Boston, pretty much the entire New England region here. So I guess at this point you would call it a nor'easter. I've seen much stronger nor'easters in regards to pressure, but in either case, though, it's potato at this point. Regardless of that, GFS is probably the most aggressive of the two models here, but very strong signal for some heavy snow over towards the region here. Of course, by the time we get into the day tomorrow or Monday, this is already on its way out. And then, of course, this is where we start to shift our attention over towards the Gulf, where this low is going to set up. By the time we get in towards Monday evening, you can already start to see the wintry precipitation begin to form up over towards Texas. We're starting to see a northward trend with that as well with the GFS. But GFS has been kind of flip-flopping between Dallas and Houston. We're going to probably stick with Houston at this point. But it looks like we're starting to see a little bit more along the variety of mixed precip here to maybe some freezing rain more so than we are seeing with snow. Now, as we go further along here, this is really one of the big bullseyes over here, and it's going to be over towards New Orleans and the boot heel part of the state. And regardless of whether you're looking at GFS or Euro here, it's pretty good agreement across the board here. almost looking pretty uniform, I would say, at this point. Then, as we go into Tuesday and beyond here, this is where we start to see the southeast coming into play here. And this is where we also begin to notice the more notable change here in regards to the low pressure's track here. GFS is, the Euro's kind of hanging a little further to the south, but the moisture makes it a little further north because it's strengthened just slightly. When I was looking at the model runs yesterday and made the video, we were sitting at about 1,016 millibars. Just that 2 millibars makes a huge difference here. As we go further along with this, it's pretty much the same thing. Low doesn't really pop up on the screen here, unfortunately in this case, but you can see with this one, GFS has also had maintained a little bit something similar to the Euro in regards to the snow line here. It's a little bit more of a northward jog here. Atlanta's right on the edge of this, so don't think I would expect totals quite as significant as the last storm, but definitely need to be watchful nonetheless, because even with that, I'm still kind of paranoid considering we got that feeder band here. Nothing that necessarily concerned me, but was definitely surprised to see the snowfall rates that we got. Right now, it looks like, if anything, the feeder band kind of sets up just to the south of Macon, Georgia here. And we end up starting out as rain and maybe a little bit of freezing rain over towards areas like potentially Savannah, also Charleston, South Carolina as well. So as we go further along, we'll start to see that freezing rain line pop up as this low begins to move off of Florida here. And a little bit of wedging happens with this little warm nose as that low strengthens. Of course, as that's going to also be occurring overnight, so still a lot can change with this as well. We'll see this race off to the north and east here, and we'll watch this leave. And then from that point, we're more or less watching for lake effect snow and clipper systems beyond this point here. With the air as cold as it is over the lakes, I would anticipate seeing quite a few episodes of lake effect here, and totals could vary with this pretty easily. So we'll have to, of course, keep an eye on things from that point. Now, the GFS is kind of interesting with this because it's showing another potential nor'easter-esque type storm. Low's a little bit further off to the off to sea at this point, so I'm a little skeptical of this look right now. Euro, of course, is not showing a great signal for this either. It's saying that the moisture is not quite going to be there in comparison to, let's say, GFS. So we're definitely not sure at this point. But as we go further along here, we see another signal pop up here, there with the Euro. GFS is kind of doing the same thing, so I don't think we're done with winter weather just yet, but there's definitely a lot of uncertainty with this. I think, honestly, in my opinion, that winter weather is one of the harder forms of weather to forecast because so much can change. There's so many minute details with this, just as there is with severe weather. But who gets affected with what? I think it's a little bit more significant with winter weather, in my personal opinion. But in any case, though, here's that line of storms that I was talking about as we get towards the end of the month based off of that Euro run where we saw that huge trough to end out January. We don't really see that with the GFS here, of course, so we don't see that big line of storms. We just see some scattered rain here and there. A little bit of snow over towards northwest here. A lot more ridging begins to occur. And it's towards the end of this model run where we end up seeing a potential for severe weather to end that model run, hence the February 3rd setup. Now, after this point, I'm leery as to what happens over towards the northwest here, but not really too concerned based off of this look right now. Obviously, we're at the very edge of these models' ranges, so I'll have to wait and see how things pan out with that as time goes on. Looking for any sort of trends at all as to what could happen next as we get towards February. That being said, we're almost done now, and we're going to be taking a look now at the ice totals and the snowfall totals within the next week here. As I've mentioned before, snow is going to be on the main part of the screen. Ice is going to be towards the bottom left corner. We're looking at the blended models on both of these. So the thing to make note of here is the good news is we're not seeing ice accumulations up to a 1/4 inch at this point in time right now based off the blend of models. Best signal that we've seen, of course, is over towards South Georgia, parts of northern Florida, and over towards the coast. But the highest that I've seen so far is 2/10 of an inch. So we're getting close. But even then, I'm hoping that these areas are prepared because we do not see ice happen here very often. It has happened in the past, but it's few and far in between. So hopefully these guys are taking the proper preparations here. Really, the best thing to do is to just not be outside when this is going on, so that way you can avoid any sort of trouble. Now, if we switch over to the snowfall models here, as you can see, there is a corridor that is pushed a little bit further to the north now. This is going to be right around that Macon, Georgia region, maybe over towards Enterprise, Alabama. And then also over here towards far southern Mississippi, maybe even, I'm not super familiar with southern Mississippi as much, but I'm sure too close, not over here. But in any case though, southern Mississippi, also towards central Louisiana, we could see easily up to 3 to 5 inches there. So we get towards the Carolina coast here. As this low begins to deepen, maybe even towards Cape Hatteras, we could easily see about 4 to 6 inches of snow here. South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina here could even see an inch of snow. Very rare for these guys. Usually the warm air from the Atlantic will sometimes come in and interfere with that, or sometimes the southeast ridge as well. So a lot of wedging usually happens here. We end up getting a little warm nose, and we end up getting rain here often. So very rare opportunity for these guys as well. So, but also with that, just make sure that you're not going out. A lot of these guys, I'm sure, do not know how to really drive in the snow, so to speak, or ice, let alone. Now, of course, as we mentioned before, Northeast is definitely looking like a bullseye this weekend. Hence why we will be going live tomorrow evening to cover that. Also, as I mentioned before, lake effect snow is going to be a big deal as well. Easily could see up to about a foot of snow just off the lakes here. These lake effect bands could spread a little further inland too and bump up these totals right as well. Right now we're kind of leaning towards maybe about an inch or two, a little bit further inland. But do not think for a second that if those snow bands do maintain themselves, which they very well could in this case, that we couldn't get maybe an additional 2 to 3 inches out of this. So it's pretty much variable at this point as to how things pan out. That being said, I know this was a long video. If you stayed to the end, definitely appreciate you guys. Make sure you hit that like button. If you like what you've seen here today, hit that subscribe button. Sure to leave a comment too, especially if you made it to the end. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and have a good rest of your Saturday.